basically,
Hello.
Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I will give a small intro to you.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another session of Achievers. Today we have Tahir. He has a trade union that he is come with. We need an alternative voice, He is a civil servant from South Africa who works for those who are struggling. He himself is an alternative voice, and it's a tagline he upholds to protect the voice of voiceless people. Let us hear from him, his own life and achievements and contributions. Please, Mr. Tahir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for this opportunity to have a discussion with you with regards to our activities in South Africa. My name is Tahir Mayepa. I come from a trade union background. I'm also a former civil servant, and I'm also a community activist. Now, in a society where we are driven by constitutional imperative, obviously you will always have a situation where there are people who have and you have those who do not have. And one of our responsibilities as activists, as trade unionists, is to make sure that we create a balance between those who have and they have not. I have been quite privileged, just like many other Muslims in this country, South Africa, where we have really enjoyed all the liberties that are expected of the majority, because Muslims in this country, we are the minority. Now, being the minority, obviously, you would expect that some of the rights, they may be infringed upon. But we've been very fortunate that South Africa, being a constitutional democracy, we haven't had any issues with regards to us as Muslims. We are allowed to practice our Islam without any hindrance. We are allowed to build masajids. We are allowed to build Islamic schools. We are allowed to do many things that generally most Muslims across the globe are unable to do or able to practice. However, being a Muslim is one aspect. You still have issues of poverty in this country, issues of inequality. You still have issues where there's high levels of crime within our communities and so forth. So as a Muslim, one may be secured in the fact that we as Muslims were able to do all these things that I've mentioned. However, what affects society, what affects our communities, it becomes our responsibility also to be able to do that. And some years back, we created a Shura Council called Gauteng Muslim Shura Council. This Shura Council basically was created with the intention to try and rally indigenous Black Muslims within the South African society, because almost 99% of indigenous Black Muslims are reverts. So it is obvious that we don't have the same experiences as other Muslim communities, like our Indian brothers, like our Malay brothers, our Pakistani brothers, because they grew up within an Islamic environment, Islamic society. So the challenges that we face as Black Muslims in the townships is completely different. It is similar to the situation of Al-Ansar. When they became Muslim, obviously they had to find a synergy between their past and their present. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he introduced Islam, basically it was not an Islam of compliance. It was an Islam of a voluntary submission, which is the most important thing. However, it becomes very difficult in our country that, when you revert to Islam, for instance, the first thing that you are told is that you need to stop eating from your mother's house because of they are not cooking halal. You need to dress up in a certain way. Now, you can imagine being the only Muslim in your household and you are told that you can't eat from your mother's house. It's a difficulty. And we had to find ways and means to navigate ourselves around that, because one of the things that Islam teaches is that you never say even oomph on your mother. Now you can imagine now telling your mother that I'm not going to eat your food because your food is haram. You're hurting your mother's heart. That in itself is a big sin in Islam. So we then decided that, we are going to create this Muslim Shura council where we can address these challenges, specifically of Black Muslims, in terms of how do we deal with these challenges and make sure that we don't necessarily end up chasing people away from Islam because they're saying, hey, this Islam is difficult to practice. You can't eat this, you can't do this, you can't, but Allah in the Quran says, I didn't give you this religion to make your life difficult. I gave you this religion to make your life easy. The problem is that we concentrate on the difficulties, we leave the easy part. So we decided that we are going to look at what will make Black Muslims, indigenous people in this country, to be receptive to Islam. Then we started creating activities in the communities, including building, having our own madrasas in the township, getting Black ulamas to teach, who understand the background of Black people in this country, who speak the same language, who can be able to articulate Islam in such a manner that it will be accepted. We started building masajids, we started building clinics within the township environment. Why we're doing that? We're doing that because we didn't want Islam to be this cult that we're sitting in our own corner alone. For instance, we have a very beautiful center in one of the townships in Winterveld, very impoverished township, where we are giving all these services for free. We have a clinic where the elderly can come there for free. The youth, they can come and do HIV tests and all those kinds of things for free. We have feeding schemes for the community, not only for Muslims, for the community. So people end up relying on the center for their daily needs. And they started to be receptive to try to understand what Islam is all about. Now, me as a trade unionist, obviously, we have a very difficult job that we have to speak against the powers that be. If our government does something that is not wrong, it's our responsibility to speak out. And this is the beauty about Islam, because Islam teaches you that if you see that is something that, when you see that something that is wrong, you need to do something. You cannot just sit back and say that simply because it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to get myself involved. So we challenge the system. We challenge the way things are that are detrimental to the population, to our communities, to our people, so that the so-called democracy, the so-called economic emancipation, the so-called the new dawn should be experienced by everybody, not by some people. And the driver behind our struggle to fight for other people, it is because that's what our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us, that those who stand up for justice, those are part of me, because of the cornerstone of Islam itself is justice. And justice means equity. Equity means that everybody must at least be able to get the basics that this life has to offer.
Thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear those stories. When you explained about this relation with mother, you told about your Fikr Council and you are making new kind of fatwas, or how you really manage these things. Do you have any special kind of integrated Fikr systems or something you implemented, to solve these issues?
Yes, what we try to do also, because when you build a nation, you don't want to complicate things. And what we did is that we took our so-called black ulemas who come from the mainstream madrasa system and created our own curriculum. Now, the curriculum that we have created is a curriculum that speaks to our challenges. And you may not know this. For instance, we have the issues of traditional healers in our communities, the so-called sangomas. Now, if somebody is a sangoma and is a traditional healer and he wants to become a Muslim, what do? Do you tell them that you need to stop being a sangoma so that you can become a Muslim? What do you do? But our Indian brothers, our Pakistani brothers, our Malay brothers, they can't explain those things because they have no such an experience. You understand? So we are able to say that Islam has never came to take away who we are, because of Allah says, I've created you into nations and tribes so that you can recognize one another. Now, our differences should not be a tool to be used against each other. It should be something that should help us to understand who we are. So there's certain things that are indigenous, which are African culture, which are not in conflict with Islam. Those things, you don't tell people to stop doing them because of they are not contradicting Islam. Now, when coming to things like food, I mean, the Quran is very clear that the food of the people of the book have been made halal for us. Allah don't say some food. He says the food of the people of the book, being Christians and Jews, have been made halal for us. But there are those forbidden things that are very clear in the Quran. Things like eating pork. That is completely forbidden in Islam. So instead of saying to a person, don't eat in your mother's house, you should say that at least try and influence your mom that if you consume pork, you need to stop consuming pork. Not because of Islam says pork is haram, but because pork is not good for human consumptions. And you come up with a scientific reasoning instead of a religious reasoning. And unfortunately, a majority of our people understand how bad pork is. I mean, we have the biggest church in Africa called the Zion Christian Church, which forbids completely the eating of pork. So it's not something that is new to us. But the moment you say to a person who's not a Muslim, stop eating pork because Islam says don't eat pork, they say, but who's Islam? Islam can't dictate to me. But if you say to them, pork is bad for you, it's bad for your health, and you give them evidence to that effect, people stop doing that and they start eating what is wholesome, that is good for their health, and it becomes much easier. Then you don't alienate people from their families.
That's great, so interesting stories. Especially, I would like to know, how you integrate with the other Muslim communities, Do you also feel some kind of, because you mentioned about the Pakistanis and Indians, the Malay, the communities over there, how you feel their lifestyle and the lifestyle of the indigenous?
Look, every Muslim, Black Muslim, I would say about 80% to 90% of Black Muslims, they became Muslim because of influence of either a Pakistan or an Indian or a Malay. So they've played a very important role in our sojourn to Muslims. And the relationship is like any other relationship. We have differences in many instances, but we manage to deal with those differences. But in a nutshell, we've got excellent relationship between Muslims who come outside of South Africa, who are now residing in South Africa. We've got very excellent relationship. Most of our programs that we do them in collaboration with them. We have a very good relationship with the Somalians, who are also very many in this country. So the relationship is quite good, even though sometimes would have differences in terms of the approach. And the issue of the approach, again, it's a matter of your background. Your background is solid Islamic background. Mine, I've got hundreds of family members who are not Muslims, and I cannot be seen to be adopting a foreign way of living. We need to understand that, and this is the example that I always make when I speak to my family members. I said, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an Arab, but the first cabinet, if I may use that term, of Prophet Muhammad, it was Arabs and Africans. Those were the first people who accepted Islam. So Islam came to Africa immediately during the life of the Prophet. It didn't come after the Prophet has demised. And most Africans accepted Islam in the hands of Prophet Muhammad because of they were taken to Arabia as slaves and all that. So this is our background. We come from Islam. Islam is not strange. Yes, due to colonization, Christianity came into Africa and all that, and they took away our Islam. And that is why even today, for instance, you may not know our language. In my language, Allah is Ramasedi. Ramasedi, it simply means the one who creates the heavens. So that has always been part of us, because we always knew that there's a greater being who's created everything that we see and we can't see. And that is the God that we always worship. We have never worshipped any other God except that, even though the manner of worship was a little bit different. So it's just a matter of making sure that when you address the issues of religion and faith, you must address them in such a manner that people can relate to. And that's exactly what we are doing. And we are, and luckily, majority of our brothers, they're starting to understand that what they do now, they are supporting us from the background so that we can do the work in the front.
Wonderful. Would you like to explain your journey to Islam? That will be great, to hear from you.
Mine, it was quite a strange one. So I come from a family of African Catholic Church. So my childhood friend, when we finished our grade 12 or matric, during that time, I went to do law in Johannesburg University, and he went to go and do medicine in another institution. So I got very disgruntled because I was an activist from the age of 14 years old. And one of the things that really puzzled me is that I'm expected to be a Christian, but the Christians in this country are the ones who are oppressing our people. And they are using the same Bible to justify why we should be inferior to them. So I simply stopped practicing Christianity. Now, my friend, on the other hand, he was a staunch Christian, and he had a very strong belief system in terms of that, because we grew up together. And now later on, he says to me, but you stop practicing Christian and all that. What are you going to do with your life? You can't live your life without faith. I said, you know what? I understand faith differently now, because faith, for me, it's all about justice. And if I can't find justice in any religion, then I'm not going to be part to that. Then we continued. A year later or so, I went to visit him in Medunsa. And when I got there, he gave me a book. He said to me, look, man, since you're no longer interested in Christianity, I was reading this book. Maybe you may be interested in this religion. And that was about 24 years ago. And I said to him, I looked at the book. The book, it was written by Sheikh Ahmed Didat. So in the university, there were Indian students who were doing dawah there. So they were distributing all these books. So he took one of those books. The book was titled The God That Never Was, or something like that. And I said, but I'm not going to follow an Indian religion. That's how ignorant I was at that particular point. He says, no. Just read this book and let's talk. Then I took the book, I put it away maybe for a month or two. One day I picked it up, I started reading this book. And, you know, the manner in which Sheikh Ahmed Deedat wrote his books, it's quite amazing, because he was talking to what I'm accustomed to. He was doing a lot of sort of comparative study in terms of Christianity and Islam, and also African context of religion. Then at one point I said, no, this is propaganda. It can't be what it's written in this book. Then I went to the Bible and compared to what he says in this book, and I found all those things in the Bible, the errors that the Bible had to show that the Bible was changed to suit a certain narrative. Then I said, no, this is something else. Then I understood why the white Christians were oppressing us, because they had to change the book to justify their actions. So it makes perfect sense now why we're sitting in that particular situation. Now, I had to now decide where to. Then I went to a mosque in town in Pretoria called Queen Street Mosque. I met an imam there, Imam Said Muhammad, who was the imam of that mosque. And I went, because I was very vocal and I was very inquisitive. Then I went and said, you know what, I read this book written by this man called Ahmed Deedat, only to find that Ahmed Deedat was his teacher in Durban. So I want to ask you certain questions. Then I started asking him questions, and he was just answering everything pounds by pounds without even looking or referring to any book. And every time I refer, all these things that they were telling me, I could find them in the book. So that's how I basically became a Muslim. But I became a Muslim due to the assistance of a Christian, not necessarily from a Muslim. So it was a Christian who pushed me to Islam. So Alhamdulillah, that's how Allah works. And then that's how I found my deen.
That's great. You mentioned about the justice, without justice, sometimes the religion cannot survive or sustain. Even the Dr. Robert Crane, he passed away a few months before. He was also talking about the highest value of Islam as justice. Could you somehow relate to your community that, how we develop the justice?
That is the whole thing. When you come from a system of oppression, of hatred, where you are seen as a subhuman being, we all know deep in our hearts that we deserve better. We deserve to be treated like other human beings. We deserve to be given the same opportunities as other human beings. But because of the system of oppression, doesn't give you that space. Now, people resort to many things. Some people, they just resort to drinking and alcoholism. Some go to drugs. Some just give up, until you reach a point where you find something that speaks to that. And when the moment you see that, you will know it in your heart that this is exactly what I want. Now, what Islam or what the Prophet has done, it's the greatest miracle, that for him to be able to achieve in a very short space of time, to make a slave and a slave master to be at the same level. It's impossible. It's almost impossible. Because remember, when you are a slave master, you have authority, you have power. But that power is also driven by the fact that you've got resources, you've got money, you've got all these things to be able to oppress others. And here comes a man, uneducated, who come from an ordinary life, and he says that we are all equal in this deen. And people are receptive to that. The rich are starting to share with the poor. the poor start advancing to the levels that are acceptable. That is exactly what we can relate to. Because the moment you come to South Africa and you speak to a Black person who come from the era of apartheid, and you tell them that in Islam, there's no superiority. A Black person and a white person, they are the same. The only thing that differentiates the two is taqwa. That's the only differentiating. You can have billions of rands. You still are at the same equilibrium, same level, because justice, the scale of justice in Islam, that is what is holding this thing together. And the moment you can see in all Muslim countries where that scale start tilting, what happens? There's chaos, because Islam came to bring order. And the moment you experiment problems, there's wars, and there's all sorts of religious system or economic system that can sustain itself without an element of justice. And that is the cornerstone of this theme.
It's really touching, to hear your experiences. And let us sum up after getting more experience on Ramadan, how you were spending Ramadan in your community and how it will really rejuvenate the culture and the other Islamic experiences over there.
Yes, in the past, obviously, I come from a township called Soshanguve, and the area that I was living, where my grandmother's house was, I was probably the only Muslim. Now you can imagine being the only Muslim. Now it's Ramadan. It's quite difficult. But what is good about it? Then people start inquiring, but what kind of religion is this? I mean, you just, because of somebody 1,400 years ago said, on this month, you must stop eating, you stop eating. You just follow him without question. What kind of a religion is this? And this is what made people to start asking. And when people start asking, you explain, they start understanding the rationale behind this thing. Nowadays, it's different from 24 years ago when I was the only person in my community who's a Muslim. Nowadays, we've got hundreds of thousands of Muslims. The townships is buzzing with masajids. So our Ramadan is exactly the same way as you would find it in Pakistan or in UAE or in Saudi Arabia. We're having the same feel now because we have built a community of Muslims within the township areas.
May Allah make this rewardable. And also thank you for being especially giving wonderful experience. This is touching and remarkable. And hope we'll have more opportunities together in future. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah. Wa alaikum salam. Wa alaikum salam.